The frozen knuckles struck the cabin door with desperate force, each blow echoing through the howling Montana blizzard like gunshots in the night. Kestrel Windwalker pressed her trembling body against the rough-hewn timber, her Apache buckskins, offering little protection against the merciless February cold that bit through to her very bones. "Please," she gasped, her breath forming crystalline clouds in the bitter air. "I'm freezing. Let me in, I beg you. I'll reward you, I promise, on my grandmother's spirit." Behind the door, she heard the scrape of a chair, the heavy footsteps of boots on wooden planks. The man inside hesitated, and Kestrel could almost feel his uncertainty radiating through the thick oak barrier between them. She knew what he saw when he peered through the frosted window, a half-frozen Apache woman, her long black hair whipped wild by the wind, her dark eyes burning with an intensity that spoke of both desperation and fierce pride. The door creaked open just a crack, revealing a weathered face and suspicious blue eyes. Coyote McAllister had been living alone in these mountains for 3 years, ever since the cavalry had burned his ranch and killed his family for harboring Indian sympathizers. The irony wasn't lost on him now. "You're Apache," he said, his voice rough as sandpaper. "What's a woman of your people doing out in this devil's storm?" "Dying," Kestrel replied with brutal honesty, her teeth chattering so violently she could barely form the words. "My horse fell through ice-crossing Devil's Creek. Everything I owned. Gone. Please, mountain man. I know what you're thinking, but I'm not here to bring trouble. Just warmth. Just life." Coyote studied her face, seeing something there that made his chest tighten unexpectedly. It wasn't just the cold that had carved those desperate lines around her eyes. It was loss, the kind of bone-deep grief he recognized because it lived in his own mirror every morning. "What reward?" he asked, though he was already stepping aside. No man with any honor could leave a woman to freeze, regardless of her bloodline. Kestrel stumbled inside, her legs nearly buckling as the cabin's warmth hit her like a physical blow. She steadied herself against the doorframe, her gaze taking in the sparse but clean interior hand-carved furniture, a crackling fireplace, the lonely existence of a man who'd chosen isolation over the cruelty of civilization. "I am Kestrel Windwalker, daughter of Chief Running Bear, granddaughter of the medicine woman White Dove," she said, drawing herself up with regal dignity despite her bedraggled state. "My people believe every life saved creates a sacred debt. I have nothing material to offer you, but—" She paused, her dark eyes meeting his with startling intensity. "But I know secrets of these mountains that could make you rich beyond dreaming. Hidden places where the earth bleeds gold, where Spanish conquistadors buried treasures centuries ago." Coyote closed the door against the howling wind, his mind racing. Gold. The word hung in the warm air like a promise and a curse. He'd heard whispers, legends, but had always dismissed them as Apache folklore. "And you'd share these secrets with a white man who's got every reason to mistrust your people?" he asked, moving to stoke the fire higher. Kestrel moved closer to the flames, her wet buckskin steaming in the heat. "You opened your door when you could have left me to die. That tells me more about your heart than the color of your skin ever." Could Coyote McAllister? His head snapped up. "How do you know my name?" A ghost of a smile touched her blue-tinged lips. "The mountains have eyes and ears, and my people know every soul who walks these peaks. You're the man who tried to protect the Lakota children during the Wounded Creek massacre. The one who gave his own horse to old Chief Standing Wolf when the soldiers came." The firelight danced across both their faces as they stared at each other. Across the small cabin, two wounded souls recognizing something kindred in the other's eyes. Outside, the storm raged with renewed fury, as if the very heavens were conspiring to trap them together in this moment of unexpected connection. Dawn broke gray and bitter over the Montana peaks, the blizzard having spent its fury during the Night, but leaving behind a world transformed into crystal sculptures and impossible drifts. Kestrel woke on the rough-hewn floor near the fireplace, wrapped in Coyote's own wool blankets while he'd taken the hard wooden chair by the window. She watched him through half-closed eyes, noting the way the pale morning light revealed the premature. Silver threading through his auburn hair, the network of scars that spoke of battles fought and barely survived. He was perhaps 35, she judged, but carried himself with the careful wariness of a much older man. "You didn't sleep," she observed, sitting up and letting the blanket fall around her shoulders. "Don't sleep much anymore," Coyote replied, without turning from the window. "Habit keeps a man alive up here." He gestured toward the snow-locked landscape. "Storms passed, but it'll be 3 days before that snow settles enough for safe travel. You're stuck here until then." Kestrel rose gracefully, her movements fluid despite the previous night's ordeal. The fire had dried her buckskins, and she'd braided her long hair back with strips of leather. In the daylight, Coyote could see she was perhaps 28, with the kind of striking beauty that came from generations of strong bloodlines, high cheekbones, eyes like polished obsidian, skin the color of burnished copper. "Then perhaps it's time I began repaying my debt," she said, moving to where he kept his simple cooking supplies. "But first, we eat. A man cannot hunt treasure on an empty stomach." As she prepared a meal from his meager stores, salt pork, beans, flour, she began to speak, her voice taking on the rhythmic cadence of a storyteller. 3 generations ago, my great-grandfather Soaring Eagle was war chief of the Chiricahua. He led raids against the Spanish missions, taking gold and silver meant for the king's coffers. But unlike other warriors who spent their plunder on weapons and horses, Soaring Eagle was wise. He hid the Spanish gold in sacred places, caves known only to our family line. Coyote turned from the window, intrigued despite himself. "And you know where these caves are?" "I am the last of his bloodline," Kestrel replied, her hands never pausing in their work. "When my father died at Sand Creek, when my brothers fell, defending our winter camp, the knowledge came to me alone. 7 caches scattered through these mountains. Enough gold to buy an army, or a new life far from the madness that has consumed this land." She served him beans and hardtack, settling cross-legged on the floor in the Apache manner. "But there is danger, Coyote McAllister. The Spanish buried other things with their gold traps, curses, guardians. And there are others who seek what I know. Bastion Crow, the half-breed who sold information to the cavalry about our winter camps, has been tracking me for months." At the mention of Crow, Coyote's expression darkened. "I know that name. He was at Wounded Creek, pointing out families to the soldiers. The children ... God help me, the children screaming." "Then you understand why I ran," Kestrel said quietly. "Crow believes he can force the locations from me, sell them to the highest bidder. Mexican bandits, cavalry officers looking to supplement their pay, railroad barons, they all want what my ancestors died protecting." Coyote studied her face in the firelight. "Why trust me? How do you know I won't just take what you're offering and leave you with nothing?" Kestrel set down her tin plate and met his gaze directly. "Because last night, when I was dying in your doorway, you could have simply waited for the storm to do what many white men have failed to accomplish, kill another Apache. But you chose differently. You chose compassion over safety, generosity over suspicion." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "And because I have seen your dreams, Coyote McAllister." "What do you mean?" "Apache women learn to read the spirits that move around sleeping men. I saw your nightmares, the burning ranch, the woman with yellow hair crying your name, the small boy who called you Papa. You seek the gold not for greed, but for justice. To build something clean from ashes, to honor the dead by refusing to let their killers win." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. Finally, Coyote spoke, his voice rough with old pain. Her name was Morning Glory, half Lakota, half Irish. The boy was Timothy, 4 years old. He stared into the fire. The cavalry said we were harboring hostile elements, torched everything, shot them down like animals. Kestrel reached across the small space and touched his hand, the first gentle human contact he'd felt in 3 years. Then we understand each other perfectly, she whispered. Two ghosts seeking to become human again. On the second day, as the snow began its slow retreat under a determined winter sun, Kestrel began teaching Coyote the ancient Apache ways of reading the mountain's moods. They sat together on the cabin's small porch, her dark head bent close to his graying auburn one as she pointed out the subtle signs that separated safe passage from deadly trap. "See how the snow lies on that ridge?" she murmured, her breath warm against his ear as she leaned close. "The way it curves, like a sleeping bear's back, that means rockfall beneath. The mountain is still settling from last night's freeze. We wait." Coyote found himself acutely aware of her proximity, the scent of sage and wood smoke that clung to her hair, the graceful strength in her copper-skinned hands as she gestured. When had he last noticed such things about a woman? When? Had the companionship of another human being felt less like an intrusion and more like coming home? "Tell me about the first cache," he said, partly to distract himself from thoughts that had no business occupying a grieving widower's mind. Kestrel smiled, recognizing his discomfort and finding it endearing rather than offensive. "Ah, but first you must understand the Apache way of hiding treasure. We do not simply bury gold in the ground like your people do. We make it part of the mountain's story, weaving it into the legends that protect it." She stood, moving to the edge of the porch where icicles hung like crystal spears. "The first cache lies in the Whispering Canyon, 3 days' hard ride south. But to find it, one must know the story of the Crying Maiden." "The Crying Maiden?" "A Spanish girl, daughter of a conquistador captain. She fell in love with an Apache warrior named Fleet Fox during a brief peace between our peoples. When her father discovered their secret meetings, he had Fleet Fox tortured and killed, then locked his daughter in a convent to pray for her sins." Kestrel's voice took on the hypnotic rhythm of tribal storytellers, and Coyote found himself leaning forward, caught up in the ancient tale. But the maiden escaped, stealing her father's war chest gold meant to finance another campaign against the Apache. She rode into the mountains seeking Fleet Fox's grave, meaning to die beside him. She found the place where he'd fallen, a hidden canyon where water seeps from the rocks like tears. There she buried the gold and threw herself from the cliffs. "And your great-grandfather found this place." The maiden's spirit showed him, grateful that an Apache would honor her sacrifice. Soaring Eagle took the gold but left a shrine to their love. Fleet Fox and the Crying Maiden united at last in death. The cache lies beneath that shrine, protected by their eternal watch. A sound in the distance made them both freeze horses, moving fast through the snow. Coyote was on his feet instantly, his rifle in his hands before Kestrel could blink. "How many?" she whispered, her own hand moving to the knife at her belt. 4, maybe 5. His blue eyes were hard as winter ice. Moving too fast for traders, too purposeful for drifters. Kestrel's face went pale beneath her copper skin. "Bastion Crow, he's found me." They moved inside quickly, Coyote barring the door while Kestrel extinguished the fire that would send telltale smoke into the clear morning air. Through the cabin's single window, they watched 5 riders emerge from the tree-lined hard men dressed in a mixture of cavalry surplus and Mexican gear, led by a tall figure whose mixed heritage was visible even at distance. "That's him, Kestrel," breathed, her voice tight with old fear. "Bastion Crow, the man who sold my people to the soldiers for silver coins." Coyote studied the riders, noting their positions, their weapons. The way they moved with military precision despite their civilian clothes. They're surrounding the cabin. Professional job. He knows I'm here. Probably tracked me through the storm. Kestrel moved away from the window, her mind racing. We can't fight 5 mounted men from a wooden cabin. They'll burn us out or simply wait for hunger to do their work. There's another way, Coyote said grimly, moving to a loose floorboard near the back wall. He pried it up, revealing a tunnel that led toward the nearby forest. Dug this the first winter I was here. Man learns to prepare for unwelcome visitors. But even as they prepared to escape, Crow's voice rang out across the snow-covered clearing. Speaking in fluent Apache, Kestrel Windwalker, daughter of the dead chief, keeper of the ancient secrets. I know you shelter in the white man's lodge. Come out, and I will spare his life. Refuse, and I will burn him alive while you watch. Kestrel closed her eyes, her hand instinctively moving to the medicine bag at her throat. The same choice that had plagued her people for generations, submit to save others, or fight and watch innocents die for her defiance. But this time, she was not alone. This time, she had found a man whose ghosts matched her own, whose strength could complement her knowledge. When she opened her eyes, Coyote saw not the desperate woman who had pounded on his door 2 nights ago, but the daughter of chiefs, the granddaughter of medicine women. We run, she said firmly, but not in retreat. We run toward the first cache. If Crow wants the gold badly enough to track me through a blizzard, then let's give him exactly what he's seeking. Her smile was sharp as winter wind. But on our terms, in a place where the spirits of the dead still walk, and Apache justice waits patient as stone. The tunnel led them through 50 yards of cramped darkness before emerging in a snow-filled ravine behind the cabin. They could hear Crow's men shouting, the splintering of wood as they kicked in the front door, the frustrated curses when they discovered their quarry had vanished. They'll find the tunnel soon enough, Coyote whispered, checking his rifle and the spare ammunition in his coat pockets. We need distance and we need it fast. Kestrel nodded, already moving with the silent grace of her Apache training through the deep snow toward where Coyote kept his horses sheltered in a hidden lean-to. 2 sturdy mountain ponies, bred for endurance rather than speed, but capable of carrying them through terrain that would challenge Crow's larger cavalry mounts. 3 days to Whispering Canyon, she murmured as they saddled the horses with practiced efficiency. But Crow knows these mountains too. He'll try to cut us off at Devil's Pass or the old mine road. Then we don't take either route. Coyote swung into his saddle, his blue eyes hard with determination. I know trails the Apache never found, paths the mountain men used during the Pia beaver trapping days. We'll stay high, follow the ridge lines. They rode hard for the first hour, putting distance between themselves and Crow's men while the morning sun climbed higher in the crystal-clear sky. The snow had settled enough to make travel possible, but every hoofbeat left a clear trail that even a city-bred tracker could follow. Tell me about Crow, Coyote said when they paused to rest the horses at a wind-scoured overlook. How did he become what he is? Kestrel's expression darkened as she gazed back toward the smoke rising from his distant cabin. Crow had clearly decided to burn it rather than pursue immediately. His mother was Apache from the Mescalero band. His father was a French trapper named Dubois. When Bastien was 12, cavalry soldiers killed his mother during a raid on a peaceful village. But instead of seeking vengeance against her murderers, he chose to join them. She spat in the snow, a gesture of profound disgust. He convinced himself that if he helped the soldiers hunt down hostile Apache, he could protect the peaceful ones. But power corrupted him. Soon he was selling information about any Apache settlement for gold, peaceful or not. At Sand Creek, he pointed out the teepee where my father sheltered wounded women and children. And now he wants your great-grandfather's treasure. He believes it will buy him acceptance among the whites, let him purchase land and respectability. But he will never understand that no amount of gold can wash the blood from his hands. A distant sound made them both turn riders, coming fast. Along their back trail, Crow had found the tunnel quickly and was already in pursuit. 5 miles to the high pass, Coyote said grimly. If we can reach it before they catch us, we might have a chance. The trail narrows there, becomes single file for half a mile. Hard to flank us. They rode harder now, pushing the mountain ponies to their limit as the terrain grew increasingly treacherous. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew steadily closer. Crow's men were better mounted and gaining ground despite the difficult conditions. The pass loomed ahead, a narrow cut between two towering peaks where the wind had carved a passage barely wide enough for one rider at a time. Ancient pines clung to the rocky walls, their roots finding purchase in cracks too small for human eyes to see. There. Kestrel pointed to a shelf of rock 20 feet above the trail. If one of us could get up there with a rifle ... I'm going. Coyote said immediately, but she caught his arm. No, this is Apache land, Apache justice. I know every handhold, every hidden path. Besides, she smiled grimly, Crow wants me alive. He'll hesitate to shoot if I'm the one holding the high ground. Before he could protest, she was off her horse and climbing with the fluid grace of a woman raised in the mountains. Her buckskin-clad form seemed to flow up the rock face like smoke, finding holds where none appeared to exist. Coyote led both horses into the narrow pass, positioning himself where the trail made a sharp turn around a massive boulder. From here, he could cover the approach while Kestrel commanded the heights. Above, the sound of hoofbeats echoed off the canyon walls as Crow's men entered the pass. 5 riders, moving in single file with Bastion Crow himself in the lead. The half-breed sat his horse like a cavalry officer, his uniform a mixture of military issue and the Mexican finery that spoke of money obtained through betrayal. Coyote McAllister. Crow's voice rang out, cultured and educated despite his mixed heritage. I have no quarrel with you, mountain man. Give me the woman and the secrets she carries, and you can ride away with your life and $1,000 in gold. Counter offer, Coyote called back, his rifle trained on Crow's chest. You and your men ride away now, and I don't put a bullet through that black heart of yours. Crow laughed, the sound echoing coldly off the canyon walls. Brave words from a man who's outnumbered 5-1. But you're forgetting something important, McAllister. I know all about you, about your dead wife and boy, about how the cavalry burned your ranch because you helped the savages. The words hit like physical blows, but Coyote's aim never wavered. Keep talking, Crow. Every word makes it easier to pull this trigger. The thing is, Crow continued, his voice taking on a conversational tone that was more chilling than any threat. I was there that day. I was the one who told Colonel Patterson about your little sanctuary for Apache women and children. I was the one who suggested making an example of Indian sympathizers. Above them, hidden on her rocky perch, Kestrel saw Coyote's hands tremble with rage and knew that Crow was deliberately provoking him, trying to make him reveal his position with a poorly aimed shot. But she also saw something else, the way Crow's men were positioning themselves, one of them working his way up the opposite wall of the canyon with a rope and grappling hook. They meant to take her alive, but they had no intention of letting Coyote survive to tell the tale. The morning sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows in the narrow pass where 2 wounded souls made their stand against the demons of their past, and where the first cache of Spanish gold waited in the canyon beyond if they could live long enough to claim it. The first shot came not from Coyote's rifle but from Kestrel's position on the canyon rim. Her bullet took the climbing man in the shoulder, sending him tumbling back down the rock face with a scream that echoed off the narrow walls. 4. She called down to Coyote, her voice carrying the fierce joy of a warrior finally able to strike back at her enemies. Crow's remaining men scattered, seeking cover behind the scattered boulders that littered the pass. But the terrain that provided them shelter also trapped them in a deadly bottleneck, with Kestrel commanding the heights and Coyote blocking their retreat. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Windwalker," Crow shouted, his cultured voice showing the first cracks of frustration. "I know where every cache is hidden. Your great-grandfather's journal fell into my hands when I raided your father's winter camp. I don't need you alive, just your blood to satisfy the spirits that guard the gold." Kestrel's blood ran cold. Her great-grandfather's journal, the sacred record of hiding places and protective rituals that she'd thought died with her father. If Crow truly possessed it, then her knowledge was no longer unique, no longer the bargaining chip that might keep her alive. But something in the half-breed's voice told her he was lying, trying to shake her confidence. If he truly had the journal, why pursue her through a blizzard? Why risk his men's lives in this deadly pass? "If you have the journal," she called back, "then why do you need me? Go claim your gold and leave us in peace." The pause that followed was answer enough. Crow had fragments, pieces of the puzzle, but not the complete picture. Not the ritual. Words that would safely open the caches, not the specific landmarks that would distinguish the true hiding places from the deadly traps her ancestors had prepared for grave robbers. A rifle cracked below, and stone chips exploded near Kestrel's head. One of Crow's men had found an angle on her position and was trying to drive her from her perch. She rolled behind a larger boulder, her mind racing through options. "Coyote," she called. "The trail widens 100 yards ahead, just before the canyon mouth. If we can reach open ground, I know the place," he called back, understanding immediately. In open terrain, their superior knowledge of the mountains would count for more than Crow's numbers. But reaching that open ground meant running a gauntlet of rifle fire through the narrowest part of the pass. And they still had to deal with 4 desperate men who had nowhere to retreat and nothing to lose. The solution came from an unexpected source, the mountains themselves. A distant rumble echoed through the peaks, growing steadily louder. Kestrel recognized it immediately. Avalanche, triggered by the morning sun warming the massive snow accumulations left by the recent blizzard. "Rockslide!" she screamed, the Apache word carrying clearly to Coyote's ears. But instead of seeking shelter, she began climbing higher, moving with desperate speed toward the canyon rim where the avalanche would have less force. Below, she heard Crow's men shouting in alarm as the rumble grew to a roar. Coyote understood instantly. He spurred his horse forward, leading Kestrel's mount by the reins as he raced toward the canyon mouth and safety. Behind him, Crow's men were caught between the approaching avalanche and his rifle fire, their horses screaming in panic as tons of snow and rock began to cascade down the canyon walls. The world exploded in white chaos. Snow and stone thundered down like the wrath of ancient gods, filling the narrow pass with a deadly river of debris. Coyote reached the canyon mouth just as the leading edge of the slide swept past, his horse's hooves striking solid ground as the avalanche spent its fury behind them. For long minutes, the only sound was the settling of snow and the occasional crack of breaking timber. When the air finally cleared, the pass was completely blocked by a wall of debris 30 feet high. "Kestrel!" Coyote's voice cracked with fear as he scanned the canyon rim, searching for any sign of her. "Here!" Her call came from a precarious perch near the canyon's mouth, where she'd managed to outrun the slide by mere yards. "I'm alive, but the climb down will take time." Below the wall of debris, muffled shouts indicated that at least some of Crow's men had survived, trapped but alive in pockets of air within the slide. They would dig themselves out eventually, but it would take hours, maybe days. "The journal," Kestrel called as she began her careful descent. Crow was lying. He doesn't have it, but he knows something enough to follow us. We need to reach the first cache quickly before he finds another way around. When she finally reached the ground, her buckskins torn and her hands bloodied from the rough rock, Coyote was waiting with the horses and an expression of profound relief. "I thought I'd lost you," he said simply, and she heard in his voice an emotion deeper than mere concern for an ally. "Not so easily," she replied, but her dark eyes held an answering warmth. "Besides, I have promises to keep. 7 caches of Spanish gold and a debt of honor to repay." They mounted and rode toward Whispering Canyon, where the spirits of the Crying Maiden and Fleet Fox waited beside their eternal shrine. Behind them, the block pass bought them precious time, but Kestrel knew that Bastion Crow was far from finished. The half-breed had survived by being ruthless and resourceful, and he would find another way to continue his pursuit. But for now, they rode free beneath the morning sun, 2 souls bound together by shared danger and the promise of gold hidden in the sacred places of the Apache. The first cache lay only hours away, and with it, the beginning of justice for the ghosts that haunted them both. Whispering Canyon lived up to its name, a narrow gorge where wind through hidden crevices created sounds like voices mourning the dead. Ancient petroglyphs covered the canyon wall's spiral mazes, hunting scenes, and sacred symbols that spoke of Apache presence reaching back centuries before Spanish boots ever touched this soil. There, Kestrel pointed to a natural amphitheater, where water seeped from the rock face in thin streams that caught the afternoon light like tears. The Crying Maiden's shrine. Coyote saw it now, a careful arrangement of stones that formed a cross between Apache burial custom and Spanish Catholic tradition. Wildflowers, somehow surviving the harsh mountain winter, grew around the shrine, in a perfect circle. But what drew his attention was the way the rock face behind the shrine seemed to fold in on itself, creating shadows that suggested a hidden opening. "The gold is behind there?" he asked, dismounting and examining the stone arrangement with the careful eye of a man who'd spent years reading the mountain's secrets. "Not behind, beneath." Kestrel knelt beside the shrine, her fingers tracing symbols carved into the largest stone. "My great-grandfather was clever. He used the Spanish gold to create something beautiful, a monument to love that transcended the hatred between our peoples. But he also made it functional." She pressed her palm against a particular symbol, a spiral surrounded by 4 eagle feathers. The stone shifted slightly, revealing that it was actually a cunningly concealed lever. When she applied pressure, a section of the canyon floor beside the shrine sank inward, exposing a natural cave that had been expertly camouflaged. "Sacred Mother," Coyote breathed, staring into the darkness below. The cave was larger than he'd expected, and even from the surface, they could see the glint of metal in the depths. But as Kestrel prepared to descend, a rifle shot rang out across the canyon, the bullet striking sparks from the rock near her head. On the canyon rim above, a familiar figure stood silhouetted against the sky. "Bastion Crow," she whispered, recognizing his distinctive stance even at distance. The half-breed cupped his hands around his mouth. "Ingenious hiding place, Windwalker. Your great-grandfather was truly worthy of respect. Unfortunately, respect doesn't fill my purse. How did you get here so fast?" Coyote called back, his rifle already trained on the distant figure. "There are many paths through these mountains for those who know where to look," Crow replied. "And I had help local ranchers who remember your wife and boy, McAllister." Amazing how generous men become when they learn someone's harboring Apache treasure. More figures appeared along the canyon rim, at least 6 men, all armed, all positioned to command the canyon floor. Kestrel and Coyote were trapped in the open, with nowhere to run and no cover except the shrine itself. "New terms," Crow announced. You can have the gold in that cache, all of it. I'm a reasonable man. But in exchange, the woman tells me the locations of the other 6. Everyone walks away wealthy. Everyone survives. Refuse and you both die here, beside your precious shrine." Kestrel looked at Coyote, seeing the calculation in his eyes. 6 armed men on the heights, no escape route, and certain death if they refused. But she also saw something else, a fierce determination that matched her own. "There's another way," she whispered, so softly that only he could hear. "The cave system connects to underground streams. If we can get below before they start shooting ... That's a lot of if," Coyote replied grimly. But his hand was already moving to the rope coiled on his saddle. "How deep?" "Deep enough, but once we're down there, we're committed. The only other exit is 3 miles through flooded tunnels and its surfaces. At the hot springs near Devil's Creek." Above them, Crow was growing impatient. "I'm counting to 10, Windwalker. Then my men start shooting, and you can explain your great-grandfather's treasures to him in the spirit world. 1. Kestrel grabbed their essential supplies, water, ammunition, the small amount of food they'd brought. 2. Coyote secured his rope around the shrine's central stone, testing the anchor point. 3. They looked at each other, 2 souls about to trust their lives to Apache legends and underground rivers. 4. Together? Kestrel whispered. 5. Together, Coyote confirmed, and they went over the edge into the hidden cave just as Crow reached. 6. And the canyon exploded with rifle fire. The cave was deeper than either had expected, the floor covered with Spanish coins that scattered like golden rain under their feet. Chests of silver, ornate crosses, jeweled chalices, the wealth of a conquistador's war chest spread before them in the dim light filtering from above, but there was no time to marvel at their discovery. Already, Crow's men were rappelling down the canyon walls, their shouts echoing in the confined space. The underground stream Kestrel had mentioned gurgled somewhere in the darkness ahead, their only hope of escape. "This way," she breathed, grabbing a handful of gold coins more from habit than greed. "And Coyote, whatever happens in those tunnels, whatever you see or hear, don't let go of my hand. The spirits of the drowned walk these waters, and they'll try to lead us astray." Behind them, the first of Crow's men dropped into the cave, their lantern light dancing across walls that hadn't seen human presence in decades. Ahead lay the black mouth of the underground river, and beyond that, either freedom or the kind of death that left no bodies for proper burial. Kestrel squeezed Coyote's hand once, feeling the calloused strength of his fingers intertwining with hers. Then they stepped into the dark water together, leaving the Spanish gold behind as they plunged into the mountain's secret heart. The underground river was a living thing, pulling them through passages carved by centuries of patient water, past formations that gleamed like ivory in the darkness. Kestrel led the way, her Apache training allowing her to navigate by touch and sound where Coyote would have been hopelessly lost. "Stay in the center current," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rush of water. The side channels lead to dead ends or worse, caves that flood completely during spring melt. They'd been in the water for what felt like hours, though Coyote knew it couldn't have been more than one. The cold was beginning to sap their strength, and twice they'd heard the distant echoes of Crow's men attempting to follow, their curses and splash suggesting they'd chosen poorly when the tunnel branched. "There," Kestrel pointed ahead to where a faint glow suggested natural light. The hot springs were almost free, but as they emerged into the natural basin where heated water bubbled up from the earth's depths, they found they weren't alone. Bastion Crow stood waiting on the rocky shore, his rifle trained on them with steady hands. Somehow, the half-breed had anticipated their route and circled around to cut off their escape. "Predictable," he said with a cold smile. "Your people." always did favor the old paths, the sacred ways. It makes you easy to track for someone who understands Apache thinking. Kestrel and Coyote stood waist-deep in the warm spring water, steam rising around them like spirits made manifest. They were exhausted, weaponless, and completely at Crow's mercy. 6 more caches, Crow continued, his voice conversational despite the rifle in his hands. I have fragments of your great-grandfather's journal, enough to know the general areas. But I need the specific rituals, the exact landmarks. Tell me, and I'll make your deaths quick. And if I refuse? Crow's smile widened, showing teeth filed. To points in the Apache manner, a mockery of the culture he'd betrayed. Then I'll start with your mountain man here. I'll wound him. Let him bleed slowly while you watch. Amazing how quickly people reconsider their principles when someone they care about is suffering. The casual mention of caring about Coyote made Kestrel's heart skip because she realized it was true. Somewhere between the desperate night at his cabin and their flight through the mountains, her feelings had grown beyond gratitude, beyond alliance. She cared about this wounded, honorable man in ways that had nothing to do with her debt or their shared quest for justice. You made one. Mistake, Crow, Coyote said quietly, his blue eyes never leaving the half-breed's face. And what's that? You assumed we came here defenseless. Kestrel understood immediately, her hand moving to the medicine bag at her throat. Inside wasn't just sacred herbs and protective stones. It also contained the small glass vial her grandmother had given her, filled with what the whites called black powder, but the Apache knew as thunder dust. The explosion, when it came, was small but perfectly placed. Kestrel had learned from watching Coyote work with dynamite during their journey, it wasn't the size of the blast that mattered, but the timing and placement. The thunder dust thrown into the hot spring's mineral-rich water and ignited by sparks from Crow's own rifle barrel, created a blinding cloud of steam and sulphurous smoke dot in the confusion. Coyote lunged forward, his mountain-trained reflexes carrying him out of the water and onto Crow before the half-breed could recover from his surprise. They rolled across the rocky ground, fighting desperately for control of the rifle, but Bastion Crow had survived by being faster and more ruthless than his enemies. A hidden knife appeared in his hand, its blade seeking Coyote's throat with practiced precision. The throwing stone took Crow in the temple with a sharp crack that echoed across the spring basin. The half-breed stiffened, his eyes going wide with surprise, then toppled sideways into the heated water. Kestrel stood on the rocky shore, her arms still extended from the throw, her face a mask of grim satisfaction. That, she said quietly, was for my father. For the children at Sand Creek. For every Apache who died because of your betrayals. Coyote climbed out of the spring, breathing heavily but uninjured. Is he dead? Finally. Kestrel knelt beside Crow's body, searching his clothing until she found what she was looking for, a leather pouch containing torn pages, covered with her great-grandfather's distinctive pictographs. He wasn't lying about having parts of the journal. But not enough. Never enough. She held the fragments over the hot spring's edge, watching the ancient paper brown and curl in the rising steam. Some secrets should die with those who created them. But Coyote caught her wrist gently. Wait. Those locations, 6 more caches of Spanish gold. That's enough wealth to change everything, to build something new from the ashes of what we've both lost. Kestrel looked at him, seeing the hope flickering in his eyes like candle flame in wind. What are you suggesting? Partnership. Equal shares, equal say in how we use the gold. We could buy land, good land, far from the cavalry and the Indian agents. Build something clean, something that honors both our peoples. She studied his face, seeing past the scars and premature aging to the man he'd been before grief and loss had marked him. You would trust an Apache woman with such wealth? With such decisions, I would trust you with my life, he said simply. I already have. The words hung in the steamy air between them, weighted with more meaning than mere partnership or shared treasure. Kestrel felt her heart racing, not from exertion or danger, but from the recognition of something she'd thought lost forever, the possibility of love, of building rather than merely surviving. Then we claim the caches, she said, but her voice was soft, intimate. All 6. And we use the gold to purchase something more valuable than wealth, a future where Apache and white can stand as equals, where children grow up knowing peace instead of war. Coyote stepped closer, his hands moving to frame her face with gentle reverence. And us? What do we build for ourselves? Kestrel smiled, the first truly joyful expression he'd seen from her. We build a love worthy of the crying maiden's shrine. We build something that will last when the gold is spent and the mountains have worn away to sand. Their kiss was soft at first, tentative, 2 wounded souls afraid to hope for healing. But as the steam rose around them and the mountain sun climbed toward its zenith, their embrace deepened, carrying the promise of passion tempered by respect, of partnership forged in fire and blessed by the spirits of the ancient places. 6. More caches waited in the sacred mountains, but they would claim them not as treasure hunters or fugitives, but as partners in the truest sense. Together they would gather the gold that would buy them land and legitimacy, but more importantly, they had found in each other the courage to believe in tomorrow. Later, as they rode toward the distant peaks where the remaining treasures lay. Hidden, Kestrel began to sing an ancient Apache song of thanksgiving that spoke of gifts received and debts repaid. Coyote didn't understand the words, but he felt their meaning in his heart: gratitude for survival, for companionship, for the chance to transform loss into love. Behind them, the hot springs bubbled peacefully in the mountain silence, carrying away the last traces of Bastion Crow's betrayals. Ahead lay the promise of gold and the certainty of challenges to come. But for the first time in years, neither Kestrel nor Coyote faced the future alone. The poor Apache woman who had begged for shelter in a blizzard had kept her promise. She had rewarded the man who showed her mercy. But in the keeping of that promise, she had discovered that the greatest treasure wasn't buried in hidden caches or measured in Spanish coins. It was found in the meeting of 2 souls who chose trust over suspicion, love over loneliness, and hope over the bitter ghosts of their shared past. In the years that followed, when the Apache Wars finally ended and peace settlements were drawn on maps that neither side fully trusted, there were whispers of a ranch in the high country where Apache and white children played together, where old enemies became friends, around common fires. Some said it was built with Spanish gold found in secret places. Others claimed it was simply the result of 2 people who chose to believe in tomorrow. Both stories were true, and both were incomplete. The real magic lay not in ancient treasures or political compromises, but in the simple miracle of a man and woman who looked past the color of each other's skin to see the matching wounds in each other's hearts and chose healing over hatred, love over loss, and hope over the winter that had nearly claimed them both.